local election 2024 broadcast. We're here in the Derg Active Alliance building in Scariff, and we're delighted to have 7 of the candidates for the local election for the Killaloe Municipal District present here and ready for a chat. Especially big welcome to the candidates. In Scariff Bay Community Radio, we have great respect for those people who put their names forward in front of the public and ask for a mandate for the next 5 years. So, and it's a daunting task, and we appreciate the courage, I suppose, and the self-belief and everything that it takes to put your name forward. So, without any further ado, I'll hand you over to the moderator for this debate, and that's David Fleming.
Thank you, Jim, and welcome listeners to this local election 2024 broadcast. Voting takes place on Friday the 7th June. 9 candidates are seeking election for the 5 seats available in the Killaloe Municipal District, an area which stretches from O'Brien's Bridge to Whitegate and to Tulla in the east, essentially all of East Clare. We're joined by 7 of the 9 candidates, and I'm going to ask each candidate now to introduce themselves, beginning with Pat Burke.
Thank you, David, and good morning, and delighted to be here with Scariff Bay Radio this morning ahead of the local election coming up in over 2 weeks' time. So Pat Burke is my name. I've been a county councillor for the past 15 years. First ran in 2009 and was successful at my first attempt, and I've been there ever since, so I'm going for 4 in a row, I suppose, this time, all going well. Born and reared in Whitegate, went to school in Scariff Community College under the guidance of John S. Kelly. I don't know, was politics on the agenda back that time, John, but look at steeped in politics, I suppose, and always took an interest and used to have plenty of banter and rivalry around election time when we were in school with the Fianna Fáil boys and girls, etc. Steeped in Fine Gael politics, I suppose. Grew up in a strong political household, my grandfather being a TD for Fine Gael back in the 1940s. So I'm looking forward to running again. I farm full-time when I'm not here this morning or working for constituents in Clare County Council, and
thanks, Pat.
Looking forward to the election.
Thanks, Pat. We'll move on to Martina Cleary.
Good morning, David, and thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Dr. Martina Cleary. I'm based in Crusheen. I'm about 20 years in County Clare. I'm a Cork woman to begin with. So I moved to Clare. Like many of our young population at the moment, I was an economic migrant. I spent 13 years abroad in Finland, forced out really due to economic necessity. Got a job in Clare. Was fortunate enough to come to this beautiful county. My background is in education and the arts. I have 30 years experience. I'm a qualified teacher, registered with the Irish Teaching Council. I currently lecture in the Technological University of the Shannon. It's my first time ever running for politics, and why I decided really was my experience in Clare Pyrite Action Group. You know, I was the first person really to come forward with Pyrite in Clare, formed the group, came forward, made it public, got 500 million through the campaign, and, you know, became active that way. And why Sinn Féin? Because they stood with us. Donna McGettigan was the first and only councillor to come to my house.
Thank you, Martina. Joe Cooney.
Thank you, David. I was elected to Clare County Council in 2004. And thanks to my loyal supporters, I've been fortunate to represent the people of East Clare since. At the time I was elected back in 2004, I did say I would be given 24/7 time to the people I was representing. I have done that since. And on June the 7th, if re-elected, I will continue doing that. Representing the people of the Killaloe Municipal District, it's vital that people have a strong voice. I work on behalf of the people I represent and will continue to do that if re-elected. And again, I'd like to thank all the people that have supported me over the years, and I'll continue supporting them going forward as well if re-elected. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Joe. And we have Audrey Flynn from the Green Party, not present, but has provided us with a recording.
My name is Audrey Flynn from Mount Shannon, Green Party candidate in the council elections. I believe that people and place need to thrive together. I will work for an East Clare prepared and resilient for what the future may bring, where people have warm homes, secure and affordable energy, good locally produced food and clean water, an accessible East Clare with prosperous businesses, family farms and livelihoods, sustainable tourism, safe roads for all users and flourishing biodiversity. The work of the County Council is so often set and defined by laws, budgets and policies decided at national and European levels. I have experience across all those levels. I have been elected to Mount Shannon Community Council, where I was co-chairperson. I've worked in Leinster House with Senator Roisin Garvey, who was herself a county councillor for Clare. And through that, I connected with MEP Grace O'Sullivan. I will bring all of that knowledge and experience with me. I am a committed listener and a hard worker. I believe in working collaboratively towards common goals, while remaining true to one's own beliefs and values. A number one vote for me is a vote for a green voice and a woman's voice for East Clare on Clare County Council. Thank you.
Thank you. And Pat Hayes.
My name is Councillor Pat Hayes. I live in Mahara, which is in the parish of Killanena, Flagmont. I'm married to Anne. I have 3 grown-up children at this stage, and I'm enjoying my terms in the council. I've represented the Killaloe district, the Scariff district, and part of North Clare in that period. I suppose getting involved in politics in the first place was to support communities, rural communities in particular. And I suppose as chair of the Rural Development Committee of the council, I have real insight into that. And we're the only council in Ireland that has a rural development strategy and a rural development SBC. So that really gives me an insight to where we are. I suppose I come very much from the farming community, really. That's where my first career choice was, to be a farmer. And I suppose the cultural background and the music in our house brought us into a lot of domains. So I feel I am from the people, and I want to continue to represent the people.
Thank you, Pat. Fiona Levy.
Thanks, David. So my name is Fiona Levy. I live in Mount Shannon, and I'm the sole parent of 4 young adults. This is my first time to run as candidate, but I've grown up working in the family business near Whitegate and moved on to work in other businesses in Dublin and abroad. But I returned home in 2010 to raise my family in the community that raised me. And I've been actively involved in the community ever since. I've volunteered with several community groups, including Mount Shannon Community Council as secretary and member, Whitegate Camogie Club as PRO a member, and the local scout group, which I led for over 10 years, and more recently presenting on the Scariff Bay Community Radio. I have a master's in project management and another one in professional practice. I'm a lecturer and consultant in leadership, change and project management and enterprise development, and believe that experience is going to help. And I consider it a real honour to have been selected to run for the Social Democrats in the Killaloe electoral area. And I look forward to serving the community here.
Thank you, Fiona. Matt Maroney, who represents Independent Ireland, can't be with us today. So we will move on to Tony O'Brien.
Morning, David, and thank you for having me here. And thanks to Scariff Bay FM. It's a great honour for me to represent my community and the community of East Clare. I live in Killaloe with my wife, Michela. I have 2 children, 4 grandchildren, all living in Bridgetown. As well as being an elected member of Clare County Council, I'm also very active in the community, having been a former chair and secretary of Smith O'Brien's GA Club, a founding member of Killaloe Search and Rescue, and I'm currently involved with Killaloe Tidy Towns, among other community groups in the area. It's a fantastic honour and privilege for me to represent the community of East Clare, and particularly the Killaloe Municipal District at council level. And I look forward to continuing that work after the 7th of June, if the people give me the mandate.
Thank you, Tony. And finally, Alan O'Callaghan.
Hello and good morning, Dex. It's nice to be here, and thanks to Scariff Bay Community Radio for having us. My name is Councillor Alan O'Callaghan. I'm married to my wife, Eddie, and we have 2 boys. I've been involved in politics now for 10 years. So I suppose I'm going for, hopefully go for my 3 in a row on this occasion. I'm also self-employed as well, which can be a busy lifetime. I suppose I got involved in politics, I suppose, to make a difference for the community. And in all that time, I've really enjoyed serving the people of East Clare. A lot has been achieved in recent years in the community. Real game changers for the area, which I'm proud to say I've helped and supported. I suppose I'm looking forward to the debate here today, and I suppose going forward, I wish over the next couple of weeks, I wish all the candidates the best of luck, and look forward to our chat here today.
Great.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Alan, and welcome again to all the candidates, and if I may be so bold to thank you for running in the election, for putting yourselves forward, as Jim Collins has said. We have received a number of questions from local community groups from the entire municipal district, And I would like to thank those community groups for submitting a number of questions, and we've been able to select a small few to gather your views and get your opinions on what matters. And they range from tourism to local policing, to rural planning, to wind farms and communication. So I'm going to ask each of the candidates one question each, and interspersed throughout the programme we will hear the candidates speak in general about particular generic questions. And therefore I'd like to start with tourism, and I'll ask Pat Burke the first question. As a potential, and this comes from Killaloe Tidy Towns, I think it is. As a potential elected representative, what is your vision for tourism in the area? What would you do to ensure that local businesses and communities can thrive through tourism and not be negatively impacted by so-called hit and run or day tourists?
Yeah, thank you, David. Delighted to be asked about tourism. I suppose I mentioned earlier that I grew up in a political household, but I also grew up where my mother back in the 1970s and 80s ran a very successful farmhouse, B&B, registered with Bord Fáilte at the time, etc. And I remember myself and my 4 siblings being bundled into the 1 bedroom on the 1st of May to make way for fishermen and tourists, and for the summer months, which was quite busy, and a lot of repeat business, English fishermen, Germans, etc. And I've often indeed served them breakfast in the mornings and that kind of thing as a shy young fella. So tourism has always been something I've had an interest in. That I suppose the bed and breakfast that time, then kind of people looked for self-catering, because there wouldn't have been ensuite bedrooms in our house or anything like that. It was the old style farmhouse. People wanted hotels, swimming pools, self-catering sort of took over from bed and breakfast, I think, and my mother finished up at that then, and built self-catering afterwards, but finished up with the bed and breakfast in the 80s. So I'm excited about tourism going forward. You mentioned Killaloe. Obviously, Killaloe have 2 hotels, the Lakeside Hotel and the King Cora, and they have accommodation at least in Killaloe. Other places in East Clare don't have, unfortunately. And the big tourism project, obviously, for this area is the Inishcaltra project, Holy Island, and the repurposing of the rectory there at the moment. The contractors are there doing great work, and we look forward to that opening in conjunction then with probably, it'll take till this time next year, I suppose, before we really see the benefits of it. Even if it opens in the winter months, I suppose it'll be quiet for a while. The big problem we have is, and you mentioned day tours or people coming, is the shortage of bed nights in this part of East Clare, Scariff, Mount Shannon, Whitegate. There are a number of Airbnbs, and they're doing great work, to be fair. Some quirky, if that's the word, little places that I'm aware of, and I've met canvassing in that, where people are running Airbnbs, but a real shortage of bed nights and a flagship hotel, if you like, in the area. The golf course in Bodyke obviously is occupied by Ukrainians at the moment. That's a loss, I think, to local businesses, while obviously they're contributing somewhat. But compared to the tourists, speaking to businesses in the town of Scariff, they've seen the Mike Max restaurant, for example, he told me the other day, no Americans at all coming that would have come to Bodyke playing golf. That's not happening at the moment. I'm involved in a pre-planning meetings with a very exciting tourism project down beside me in Whitegate, so I'm looking forward to, a bit confidential at the moment, but looking forward to something good coming out of that. And Loch Derg is a huge attraction, plus the Slivakti area then for walks and slow tourism and that. Disappointed with the Limerick to Scariff Greenway that it's not extending out to Mount Shannon, because when people in Limerick City hop on a bicycle and arrive in Scariff and the last square is Holy Island, the Greenway for now isn't extending to there. Disappointed with that. But look at East Clare is a huge offering for tourists, slow tourism, walks in the mountain areas, boating at the lake, fishing, etc. There's huge potential here. The Killaloe bypass will be a huge addition to this area, plus the Inishcaltra development. So I think there's exciting times ahead for tourism in this area.
Great. Thank you very much, Pat. Can I move on to urban regeneration and dereliction? And this comes from Whitegate. And I'll address this question to Martina Cleary. Some villages and towns are thriving, others are not. Long-term negative economic impacts have left some villages and towns with derelict or unused buildings, which in turn creates an undesirable atmosphere. How can the council be far more proactive than they have been in promoting economic initiatives in those towns and villages in decline? And how should dereliction be tackled?
Yeah, this is really quite an important question. I suppose as a new candidate, part of the opportunity of canvassing has been to see all of our villages, and I've really enjoyed that. It's been really eye-opening, but a really sad, resounding issue in that is many of those villages have no life in them. You're lucky if you have one shop. I was in O'Brien's Bridge and completely shocked to realise there wasn't even a functioning shop there. So how can you cater for that? You know, if you're an elderly person in the community, you can't necessarily get into your car and drive up to Killaloo or down to Limerick, and you mightn't want to anyway. I come from Crusheen myself at the moment, and you know, it's a recurring issue on the doorsteps. The population has doubled there, and many young first families, they have their first starter homes, very young families, and there's nothing in the village besides the petrol pumps, a shop, and before even the big development behind the small playground, you know, there's no resources. Now the planning, what was said to me was that planning permission for Crusheen in the county development plan, it necessitated proper resources, you know, for that, having a cafe, having a restaurant, having some kind of sports facility that caters to a diverse community, having a GP, having just very important for a lot of young mothers and fathers these days as well is access to childcare. And there's nothing there, you know, and you have basically a drive-through. I grew up in a small village myself to the age of 9, and thinking back on that time, the village is the ecosystem. You've got the rural community and the hinterland coming in. We had at least 3 or 4 different shops there. We had 4 or 5 pubs that were all vibrant and functioning. You had a hardware store. You had obviously the church there. You had at the time when I was very young, there was even a cinema functioning. There was a community hall. There was the sports pitch. And like going to the village for the people in the hinterland, that was the focus of their life. It wasn't, you know, beyond in the cities and everything. I feel very, very sorry for the young families now and the children coming into these communities where there's nothing except you're driving in, you're driving out, you're sleeping, there's nowhere to go, there's nowhere to even safely walk, you know.
Can the council do anything?
Well, I think there's a couple of strategies here. You obviously have the vacant property refurbishment grant. Now, looking at that is 50 to 70,000 euros. And unfortunately, it's one of those schemes that's been put in place by Darragh O'Brien and his department. I've dealt with him personally myself in the, I suppose, negotiations on the DCB, the Defective Concrete Block Scheme. And the problem with that is for people that want to access that, if you're a young starter family and you want to refurbish one of these properties in the middle of a village in Tulla or anywhere, Crusheen, you don't have 50 to 70,000 up front. You don't have access to that. You're coping with getting a mortgage and drawdown. Like these schemes, they look fantastic on paper, but functioning, they're not functioning, you know. So that needs to be, relooked at, really. The Rural Regeneration and Development Fund, there was 164 million recently announced. Now, if you look at the detail of that, there's 30 projects right across the country. One has been given to Scariff. It's fantastic. We got it. We definitely need it. We need a hub there. But if you don't have the people in the centre of the village to actually access and use that, it's useless anyway. It looks good on paper. So like that needs to be really looked at. Who is it catering to? And then more of it, please. The Sinn Féin policy for housing is 20% of public and affordable housing will be towards the centre of these communities. It is going to be dedicated to refurbishing properties and making sure that the Críochnha is also redirected, you know, that it will be accessible, that it's going to be functioning within the bigger, redressing. It's absolutely essential. I have a studio over in Tulla for the last 5 years as an artist, and it's coming close to the end now. I'm fortunate to have, access that. But it's so sad, walking through the village there, and I often think, my God, if I had the money just to redevelop the centre of it, because so many properties there, you've got one shop, and you just have literally empty, and you see it when you're canvassing as well, empty frontage on a lot of those villages.
Thank you, Martina. We'll move on now to local policing, and I'll ask this question to Joe Cooney. Councillors meet with police representatives as part of the Clare Joint Policing Committee. How will you work to enhance public safety and ensure effective law enforcement in our community? And this is a question that's come from us from Scariff.
Okay, well, I suppose looking first of all, David, the closing down of some of our rural Garda stations in the past hadn't helped the situation. and also limited hours in some of the stations we have open in the county and in the Killaloe Municipal District. That's a serious concern, and we're all well aware the local guard in the local community is very important. But unfortunately, that system has changed now, and we've gone into districts, and we've been covered by different districts. Levy, some are clear in this district, and more clear the Nina district, unfortunately. And in my own situation, my own parish in O'Callaghan's Mills, believe it or not, there's half the parish in one area and the other half of the parish in the other area. So that's not helping the situation. And I think that needs to be reviewed again, to be honest with you. At least the parishes should be all in the one district. They have the full parish. That's my belief. They should be looked at. Also, I believe then if you're in a certain area, the Scariff Garda Station covers a certain area of the Nina district, and the Killaloe Garda Station covers another area of the Killaloe MD. And that makes it confusing as well, because I do know that if the Scariff guards have to attend, say, something in Killanena area, they actually have to pass through Fetal and go up to a place in Killanena that don't be part of their area, but they have to travel up there to look after whatever the concerns is. Again, look at the system. Some people are in favour of what's there at the moment. I would be concerned. I mean, there's serious issue of speeding going on. There's serious issues of theft going on. And as I say, when you don't have the local guard to get the local knowledge, know what's going on, I think that is a concern. Having that said, a number of weeks ago, I had to call the Garda station in Ena on an incident that was happened in my own area. And in fairness, I must say, the service was excellent. I got back to straight away. The issue was dealt with. It was followed up. And again, I have no complaints that way. But I think the local community guards, more in conjunction with the community alert groups, and we had a lot of community alert groups in the past, but unfortunately a lot of these community alert groups have fallen aside. Now, in fairness, COVID didn't help the situation, and we know a lot of things changed after COVID. And I think the community alert groups and volunteers have fallen away because of COVID, and it is easy to get volunteers anymore like it was in the past. But policing is vital and important to communities and to districts. And we need to be improving on the system that's there. As I say, I'm not giving out about the system that's there, but the local community needs to be looked after. I mean, a big issue I have got on the doorstep is the speeding of traffic through built-up areas, and that needs to be looked at, and that needs to be addressed. And we have to think of the safety of the people there that's living in those areas, and we need to slow down the traffic going through. We get a lot of calls to Clare County Council about putting traffic calming in place, but is traffic calming going to slow down? Signage won't, maybe speed ramps on roads will, but I think the guards need to use their authority to slow down the speeding going through, especially built-up areas.
Thank you, Joe. We'll be coming back to that issue of traffic in one of the questions, because, as you say, it is an issue that has been raised by even two organisations that have sent questions in to us. At this point, I'd like to ask all the candidates a question, and we'll go in reverse alphabetical order to give the last person a chance on the alphabetical list. And I hope this is an easy one for you all, because I'm sure you have thought about this. If you are elected to the council, what are your top two priorities that you will tackle immediately on entering the council, if elected? And we'll start with Alan. What are your top two priorities, Alan?
Our top two priorities, I suppose, is obviously to service the people, and I suppose a lot of the areas that I represent is rural areas. I suppose Pat talked about tourism. That is a huge benefit for our area, especially now with Inishcaltra, with Craiganoe, Napogue, and in conjunction with Bunratty. So I think that's going to be a massive priority for me if I get re-elected, is to try and keep that going. You have Queen Abbey as well. So there is a big tourism pot there that needs to be brought to the boil, and I think we're actually working well at the minute, even at an early stage, where Clare County Council have taken over these sites. The numbers in Craiganoe are flying out the door at the minute, which is great to see.
busiest again in 50 years there recently enough for an event that was held. So I think that is a huge, and it's like anything, when you bring that kind of stuff to an area, everything grows around it. You know, coffee shops created, as Pat said, maybe a bit of Airbnb. You know, it all, and I was only up there the other day, and you do see the Europeans coming there, you see camper vans, you see bus loads, so you're seeing all that different variety of school kids coming as well, so you see big variety of that. So that'd be one of my, I suppose, drivers going forward.
Very good.
Would be involved in it. And I was involved, I suppose, with something else as well, through the Clare County Council, was the Spencer Hill Fair at that time when they struggled to get insurance. And I suppose, in fairness, the chief executive with the IVP insurance kind of, I approached them, they stepped in. Now it's going to be a challenge every year going forward to keep the insurance on something like that. But events like that, we do need to keep going. Yeah. It's very, very important.
Thank you, Alan. Tony O'Brien, top 2 priorities for you when you go, if elected.
I suppose housing is in particular is number 1. And particularly affordable housing. There's a cohort of people, I suppose, out there. They don't qualify for social housing because they're out working and they're earning, their income has put them over the limit. The threshold, I think, for Clare here for a single person is 37,000 or thereabouts. And so you're talking about somebody earning 30 with maybe 1 child or 2 children in around the high 30s. That cuts them out for a couple for social housing, but on the same hand, the banks won't let them inside the door. So there is a cohort of people there who are caught in that trap, you know, and they're probably paying 200-300 euros a month more for rent than they would be for a mortgage if they could get one. So I think housing, both social and particularly affordable, to identify sites for that. And I suppose the second thing I want to maintain is the investment in East Clare. We've been very proactive in attracting and in convincing Clare County Council to invest in East Clare. You saw last week the investment in Scariff, and I just put it out there, don't have any fear. The community of Scariff are very much involved in this because we met with the town's teams, the community council. We've met with the residents, we've met with the people who do business, who own commercial premises around the town. And while everything isn't perfect in the plan that was produced for this, there is a basis of work there for that. So investment in our communities. Clare County Council, we've been successful in getting Clare County Council to invest in Inishcaltra as a key site to attract people. Ballycuggan, the upgrade of facilities in Ballycuggan. Of course it's not perfect, we need extra parking down there, you know, but we need to keep investment coming into, and that's to, I suppose, upgrade our amenities and what have you. But also, I look at the Finsa factory just down the road from us. That was a key employer and a key economic driver within East Clare for many, many years. And with the opening of the Killaloo bypass and Newbridge crossing now across the River Shannon, we're only half an hour from the motorway. That again has the potential to be a key economic driver for East Clare and for what we have here. So I suppose again, in a nutshell, housing, particularly affordable housing, and investment, both public and private, back to keep that going in the region.
Thank you, Tony. Fiona, same question to you. Top 2 priorities.
So at the risk of not being repetitive, because Tony's taken 2 of mine. Fair play to Tony.
You can always feel free to copy me on the others.
No.
Is there a vote sharing pact? Or
yeah, exactly. So I'll look at 2 other pieces then, because I do feel that community-led planning is really important, but I'll look at something else. I think with my business background, investment in rural enterprise is really important. I'm delighted that the Merryman is going to be turned into something that hopefully local businesses, remote workers can use. And I did write a piece in the Clare Echo recently about the digital hubs that are around, and I'm delighted there's one in Fecal. But for a lot of people, they aren't affordable. And I have seen how they can work really well in other areas like Waterford at a rate of €15 a month, €10 a day, €40 a week. Is not affordable for some people trying to set up a business. So investment in rural enterprise, which supports small to medium enterprises or businesses, is really close to my heart. And the other one, which comes up on the door so much, is social care and childcare systems. I want to fight for that as much as possible. I do feel that people have been able to talk to me about it, probably because I'm a mum, I'm a sole parent as well. I actually wanted to study politics in UL. David, you were a director of my course at one time, long time ago. And I couldn't go because the childcare centre didn't open early enough for me to get to the 9 a.m. politics course. So I had to go to do something else. And that was a long time ago. So I do think childcare systems to support lone parents, so men, male parents, female parents, doesn't matter. We need to support those people. We need to support the childcare operators as well, because they all tell me they're not being supported enough.
Thank you, Fiona. Pat Hayes, what are your top 2 priorities if re-elected?
I think as we go along here, it's like getting the first bite of the cherry. I had my 2 top things were affordable housing and business support, and I still I'll come back to change it, but look at affordable housing. I think we've been approved for Shannon and Innes, but ultimately we need to be in Tullis, Scarf, Crusheen. We need to get those middle-income people that are struggling, and I would give it a far more priority than social housing at the moment, because there's a group of people out there that now are struggling to get mortgages and get on the ladder, and that scheme needs to be adopted and changed a bit more as well to get people in there that can't actually get a basic house. And I think we're finding that a lot more graduates and people that go through the training and everything, they're in their 30s before they start to get a house and to get a mortgage or anything like that. So that needs to happen and change. The issue here in terms of business support, and we've had a lot of discussion, issues have been talked about rural villages and towns. I think we have to find a formula to support businesses that are existing, because they're under a lot of stress, and I think that's a priority for us all going forward, that we actually find support and ways of reducing costs and trying to see can we get more rate support and reduce all that we actually keep the people that we have here in some of our villages and towns. And like, it is all right to talk about rural villages and towns. I think the people themselves speak with their feet as well, because you have the Aldi's, you have the Tesco's, and you have all the people travelling out of your own towns and villages for better bargains. And no matter what you'll do, they'll shop local for certain things, but they'll move out. So I think ultimately we have to try and keep what we have and encourage that to go. I suppose the other thing that I just wanted to, and I think is a challenge for us, is our road infrastructure and investment in that. Presently, we're down to 5.7% of the road being reconstructed annually in Clare, which is supposedly at 10%. So we have to advocate for the people of the Killaloo district to try and get extra funding. We fought recently, we got an extra 2.5 million out of development levies put back into infrastructure across the county, because we were rejecting the proposals from the council. So it's to advocate to get extra funding and development. Like there are so many elements that you could take on board here. Like Crusheen, of course, I'd love to see the rail stop opened as a priority, which is one of the things that I've been advocating. And I remember my mother saying when she left Crusheen to go to England, she hopped on on the train in Crusheen, went, and it was probably transferred back in the 50s and 60s for everyone. So we need to get back to that level, because it helps the environment and helps a whole lot of things.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pat. It's okay to repeat priorities if you believe in them. I don't think our listeners will object to that. Joe Cooney, have you got your top 2 priorities if you're re-elected to the council?
I have indeed, and first of all, I want to compliment the great investment that's come into our area over the last 10, 15, 20 years. A lot has been achieved, and there's no point saying there hadn't. An awful lot has been achieved. There's a lot of big projects on the pipeline at the moment, which are progressing and which are going to be delivered in the very near future. The like of the housing here in Scariff, the Killaloo Bridge crossing, the visitor centre on Mount Shannon, the heritage sites which have been taken over by Clare County Council. We have 2 doors, Craigan and the castle itself, so that's simply fantastic altogether. So an awful lot has been achieved there, but we have to keep continuing progress, and progress is always very important. And if we don't keep progressing, then we're going to be left behind. And unfortunately, the areas that's been left behind, I have 2 key issues. The first one is the rural villages. I mean, we need more infrastructure into the rural villages, because unfortunately we can see some of them are dying on their feet, unfortunately. It's gone to a situation, you don't even have a shop now in a number of rural villages, and that's not good enough for them communities and them people living in them rural villages. And the only way we can improve that is to get proper infrastructure in there, unfortunately, with the times we're living in now, with the environment and all that situation. We have to get the infrastructure in. That's something I've been working on in the last number of years. We'll continue working on that. As we are well aware, we have a wastewater pilot scheme approved for Bradford Village. We'll be working over the next number of years to progress that and hopefully get that project delivered, and hopefully that will help the other rural areas as well. Unfortunately, all these things take a lot of time. It's something I'm getting on the doorsteps again. It's about the infrastructure in the rural villages and what can be done for them. But if re-elected, that's one thing I definitely will be working hard on to try and make progress. And it's all progress and not easy to make progress, but if we don't keep working at it, it won't happen. And the other one is our road infrastructure. Serious concerns about the state of some of our roads at the moment, especially after the inclement weather conditions over the last 8 to 10 months, has really taken its toll on our road infrastructure. We need to be progressing to improve some of our local and minor roads as well, but definitely bring them at the moment up to a proper standard that the people living on them deserves. Unfortunately, it's because of a lack of funding that our road infrastructure has gone into the serious stage it's in at the moment. A lot of great work been done, and a lot of work has been done over the last number of weeks, and we can all see that driving around. But what has been happening for the last 10, 15 years has caused this serious problem because roads have been neglected, not been looked after, not been brought up to the proper standard they should be year after year. We know we can only do so much, but we've roads now in this county for the last 20 to 25 years have not been resurfaced or retired, and now we are unfortunately left in a situation. There's a lot of these, and some of the minor ones gone into disrepair. There's people, if something don't be done some before this winter come in, they will not actually be able to travel on them.
Thank you very much, Joe. Martina Cleary, do you have two priorities that you would tackle immediately on if elected?
Absolutely. They're obviously related to housing, issues related to housing, and also planning reform. Now, this morning it was ironic to see RTE publishing the Housing Commission calls for a radical policy reset. And this was commissioned by the Minister himself of Housing. And his own commission is actually saying that there's a deficit of 256,000 homes, that we have one of the poorest outcomes in Europe, and that we need to be building 23,500 houses per annum. Now, it's a bit late in the day. We've had the same government in place under Fine Gael for at least 12 years, propped up by Fianna Fáil. It was very well to say that housing is a priority and we'll get housing done, but you've had 12 years and more, actually much longer, to get housing done. And there's been nothing said about how you actually going to do it. So under the Sinn Féin new housing policy, for example, this idea of affordable homes, how are you actually going to achieve it? What's an affordable home for a starter home? Somewhere between 250,000, 268,000. And how do you actually manage that? You separate some of the costs, because the building costs in this country are quite different to the land costs and the registration and the VAT and everything else that's associated with actually the land acquisition. Now, under Owen O'Brien's new housing policy, he's actually saying, well, the state is going to take over some of those lands. They're going to be kind of in perpetuity leased, so that how can you make housing actually affordable? You're looking at the actual building cost to keep that down, and that the state is actually funding the land purchase, because an awful lot of the escalation of building in this country is the rezoning of land and the speculation on particular sites. That's where it's happening. So I think you can say until the cows come home, literally, what you're going to do, but nothing has been done here yet, and we're facing the biggest housing crisis, the worst in Europe. That brings me to planning reform. Now, I suppose looking at that whole issue of, I know myself as an impacted homeowner that has to demolish my home, I've been given a demolition, and there are hundreds if not thousands of homes, not just with defective concrete blocks, but building defects, legacy building defects. And even speaking to colleagues and people in the arts who have been fortunate enough to get onto the leader scheme or have a studio or have a small business, it's the planning that is choking them up. It's that planning reform that's needed. We need it centralised, and that is, I suppose, another part of the Sinn Féin policy is to put in at least 10 million into recruitment of 500 additional staff over a 2-year period. So extra resourcing for An Bord Pleanála as well. And very importantly, commitment to informed participation and communication with stakeholder planning, the communities in the planning process. I know it's not in our county, but I was reading the story of that gentleman. He was in his 60s, and on his own land in Tipperary, he was putting in a small modular home to live in. He took his own initiative to actually clad it so that the water wasn't freezing in it for the winter, and he was running into problems putting even a mobile home in the middle of a housing crisis on his own land. Now, I think that's disgraceful. I think we need to look at it. It can't just be county by county. There has to be a whole restructuring of the planning system, and it has to be transparent for our communities, so that you're actually facilitating people, and that includes the enterprise and having access to be able to have a business on site or to improve your business as well. They're getting choked at planning stage. So those two priorities.
Thank you, Martina. And finally, Pat Burke, have you got two priorities that you'd like to tackle immediately if re-elected?
Yeah, plenty of priorities, I suppose, and avoiding repetition again. Earlier on, Martina touched on if she had the money, she'd revamp the street of Tulla. So the continuing promotion of tourism, which always brings me down to Mount Shannon again, and the vacant hotel in Mount Shannon, that unfortunately is starting to slip into a derelict state. And I wish to God somebody with a big checkbook would come along there and revamp that, similar to Martina spoke about in Tulla, with a lot of the dereliction. But that all leads to the continuing promotion of tourism, I suppose. Somebody, we may not have touched on it in the priorities, so rather than repeating. So, the opening of the Killaloe bypass is going to be a huge game changer for this corner of East Clare. And I accept Councillor O'Callaghan mentioned the acquisition of the heritage sites, obviously, and Bunratty, Napogue and Craiganone will be marketed with Inishcaltra going forward by Clare County Council's Tourism Directorate. So you get 1 million plus visitors to the Cliffs of Moher, where they'll be encouraged to visit East Clare, which includes Bunratty, Napogue, Craiganone and Inishcaltra. So I see huge potential there, but we have to keep the foot on the pedal. And with our recent our departure of Leonard Cleary, the Director of Services, who was the brains behind all this, if you like, he has moved on now to Galway. And if re-elected, the continuing promotion of tourism is certainly a priority for me. And also, while we don't have that much influence, I suppose something close to my own heart is the protection of farm families, so important to rural East Clare. I have my finger on the pulse as regards the produce from farms. I'm a director of Clare Marts. I see it firsthand every week, and thankfully the trade has been good. Sheep and cattle, not so much sheep in this area, but cattle and good quality cattle will always be in demand. Where the subsidies now are driven towards the environment, and that's fine. But at the same time, if we don't keep producing food, be it milk or beef, we could run into trouble. I don't know anyone around this table see the day where we might have a shortage of food or God forbid, a famine situation, but we're being driven to produce less, and I'm not so sure that's the way forward. Obviously, we have to mind the environment and that. So constantly speaking to farmers every day, it's important to me. Farming is close to my heart, and the protection of family farms as far as possible, blended in with the subsidies, so that people can stay on the land in some shape or form. I'd like to come in later maybe to respond to Martina's issue on planning and housing and that, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you, Pat. Well, let's go back to our questions from our local organisations and community groups, and one of them is rural planning. And one of the questions, and I'll put this to Pat Hayes, has been around rural planning. Pat, what changes would you propose in order to make planning permission less restrictive to non-locals, yet at the same time discouraging the rise in holiday homes, which we've seen in other parts of the county?
Yeah, planning permission is an emotive issue. And if you start out and you want to build a house, your expectation is that you should be able to build it. But I suppose the first challenges that arose was Ogonnelloe years ago. Long before I was a councillor, Ogonnelloe got bought up by a lot of outside people and built holiday homes along the whole Ogonnelloe into Killaloe. And while the County Development Plan talked about it being a scenic and important regional road, there was no protection. And what happened was that the local rural people couldn't actually get planning permission because buy the land to build on, because outside influence was paying massive prices for it. And you still see today in parts of our county. So new rules and regulations were introduced and have been growing every year since, in terms of who is entitled to build a house and the rules and regulations around it. And I suppose environmental concerns have come down the road in terms of percolation, in terms of proper sanitary and all that comes with it. And also we have designated land that has come in. We have SPAs, SACs, where Europe and different organisations have been saying, well, hold on, we need to protect this. We can't have carte blanche planning and housing going everywhere. So we're guided by our county development plan. While you asked the question, how would we free it up and make it easier for people to come in and build? Of course, I didn't turn off my phone.
It's all right.
My apologies when I went out.
We'll cut that.
My apologies, I had to turn it off when I went
That's
out.
all right, that's okay.
And I just, in order to get the call, I had to turn it on.
Don't lose your train of thought, though.
I might have. But one of the key things where we work from is our county development plan. So basically, the Killaloe is a diverse area. You have the Slieve Aughties, you have the scenic routes around lakes, of all that. But one of the key underlying things that we want to do and achieve is to try and get local rural people the opportunity to build locally. And I think that is one thing that we've all fought here individually and collectively, is to try and encourage communities and people to live in it. There are a number of key elements in terms of planning permissions, individual planning permissions. If you have the proper percolation, if you have the proper sightlines and proper siting. So, and the policy then where there's certain areas of the county zone that are overdeveloped, in particular areas around the Loch Derg and Loch Graney and different areas where you have, and then you have busy regional roads as well, as we see now out transversing these days. I often wonder to myself, how do certain people get planning? But that was prior to any regulations, because you're talking about 170 and 80 metres each side on a regional road. So that prohibits, some of the regulations prohibit planning development, because it's for health and safety, it's for all reasons. Wastewater, all that, they all come into being. So look, there is no one policy that's going to help communities. We'd love to embrace and change, but statistics show that then you asked the question, could other people come in from outside as well to build? There are certain parts of the county we'd encourage that, but there are certain restrictions in some of those areas. It isn't a blind science like that. You can actually say there are certain roads around our communities here that you go out, there's more people living a mile from a town and the town itself is dying. So you have to introduce plans and regulations to try and encourage people to come into centres of towns. And I was actually amazed, as Martina said earlier, that Honor Brain wants, and the planning department want to centralise more things from planning. We actually want more power down here, that we can actually do it locally and try and encourage people and vary our own plans. We've had the big brother hand come in from the planning regulator. We've had all those departments and the ministers come in on top of us when we wrote a county development plan here, where we're trying to help and encourage development in our towns and villages and rural areas. And the minister and this permanent government that I talk about, which are the higher civil servants that dictate policy rather than politicians now. And it doesn't matter which party goes into power here, because nobody seems to be able to stand up to the permanent government, in my view, to actually have the power to stand up and take hold of the country. And I'm saying that against my own party and every party, because ultimately civil servants at a high level, we went to the delegation, Martin talked about the Burden Bureau, we went for the Hinharia project. The minister listened wonderfully to what we said. And next thing, the top civil servant in the department said, well, now, Minister, if you do that, the majority won't gain, it will be a minority. So he actually, after an hour and a half long debate with the minister, the top civil servant pulled the rug from under us. So that's the challenge for us all as a society and a state, to actually change that and stand up against. We have it, we need to do it in our own council as well. because there is an internal system that works across. And look, that's for a further debate, but it's something that actually feeds very clearly back into our county development plan and feeds very much down to people. And when you tell an individual that he can't get planning or she can't get planning over some national policy, that's not very helpful, but it is a challenge for us, and looking forward to working through it.
Thank you, Pat. We move on now to traffic, and this has come up already in our conversation this morning. This is a question now I'll put to Fiona Levy, and it has come from two groups, one in Ogonnelloe and one in Kilkishen. And it is with regard to the new bridge in Killaloo, the new bypass, and the development of Inishcaltra as a tourist area, as a tourist interpretive centre. With those developments, traffic is expected to increase, particularly in Ogonnelloe, but more generally in East Clare, Mount Shannon and so on. How would you work with communities such as those at Ogonnelloe, Kilkishen and Mount Shannon to implement a traffic calming scheme or another solution that might address increased traffic that is expected?
Yeah, look, we know that there is going to be increased traffic coming down the line. I mean, I've spoken to people in Mount Shannon and they're terrified that we're going to turn into another Doolin with a load of paddy wagons clogging up the lovely main street there. And, you know, while we all want tourism, and my family was involved in tourism, we need to do this in a competent way. We need to approach this in an efficient and competent way, looking with long-term foresight. We're just building a bridge in Killaloo that is to complement a bridge that has been there for 1,200 years. It's taken us 1,200 years to get to build a second bridge in Killaloo. I've already spoken to people, residents on the doors in Kilkishen about traffic calming, so I'm well aware of that. In Ogonnelloe, precisely at the community hall, I spoke to a resident across the road. He's terrified every morning coming out of his house, his driveway, because that bend is so dangerous there. And he has been clocking the speed of some cars passing through there. So it really is an issue. And I'm really aware that the residents of Ogonnelloe are concerned about this. Not only that, we have in Scariff, as you leave Scariff going towards Mount Shannon, there's people are taking over other cars the whole time. That we need double white line there on the approach there. In Clooney, for example, people are streaking through there at really high speeds. I was there the other day, nearly got knocked over, just being on the footpath or the non-existent footpath, excuse me, because one half of Clooney has a footpath and the other does not. You mentioned earlier, somebody mentioned earlier about the Greenway. I think it was you, Pat Burke. I completely agree with you there. And I worked with Owen O'Hagan actually several years ago before he presented to Leo Varadkar his vision of a Greenway, which thankfully was taken up. But I cannot understand why we don't have a path and cycle lane from, too rainy now, because thankfully we have a fantastic one all the way from Killaloo, why it is stopping and why there has been no planning, definitive planning up towards Mount Shannon, because we want people to walk and cycle all the way over to Inishcaltra. It just seems like it's disconnected and there hasn't been any forethought with that planning. So yes, Kilkishen, traffic calming there. There is a tabletop. I've spoken to residents who said that's just clearly not enough. And Ogonnelloe, something has to be done about that before there's an accident and more traffic starts to pass through that area.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. Let's move on to a very topical issue at times, and I'll put this to Tony O'Brien, and it is the issue around wind farms in East Clare. Now, to ensure a carbon-free future, we need renewable and sustainable energy. Wind turbines are one such solution, yet individuals and local groups can sometimes object to the development of wind farms in their areas. What can or should the council do in approaching these wind farm applications? How should the council deal with them when we know that they're needed, that sustainable energy is needed, and yet local groups, and this is a question that comes from Badike, where there is proposed developments going on. How should the council balance these two issues?
I suppose, David, from the outset, to answer your question directly, the council don't have any discretion in how to deal with it. They deal with it through planning legislation and planning law. That's not to say that I agree with the planning law or the planning legislation, but how do communities deal with what's coming down the track to them? I think that's the broader question. And somebody mentioned, I think it was Martina mentioned planning reform. There are guidelines on the guidelines that are being used, and the planning criteria that's being used at the moment for wind farms was brought out in 2006, which is totally outdated, not fit for purpose, and is anti-community, I suppose is the way I would put it. There are guidelines, new guidelines since 2016, I think it was, and they're sitting on the minister's desk, which need to be implemented. And there are a lot of concerns, a lot of fears, a lot of trepidation in our communities in regard to the current applications before the council and before the Board Panola regarding the wind farms. For example, a very simple and basic one is the height of these turbines are now gone to 180, 190 metres high. When the legislation or the planning laws that we're dealing with presently, the maximum height was about 80, 90 metres, and that was considered enormous. So to answer your question directly, the council don't have any discretion. They must deal with it through the planning law and planning legislation. But I have huge concerns. Personally, I have huge concerns. I have objected to a number of the wind farms. And on the basis of my objection was supporting the communities that are going to be impacted hugely. And just a brief outline of my reasons is, one is the planning legislation and planning laws. They're outdated, they're not fit for purpose. There is a lot of anomalies within the planning legislation. And very simply, we have landowners, farmers, sons, daughters, who have applied for planning permissions to build a family home on their land. And they've been told it's visually obtrusive. You can't do it, you can't build here, you can't go there. And yet, maybe 200 metres behind the house, on a height higher, we see planning permission can be granted for a wind turbine. That's a huge anomaly for me, because if we don't look after the people, that's the first thing. We have to look after our local people. People will say to me, there's a bigger issue here. Of course there is, energy protection and energy security, but not at any cost. There are a number, I suppose, again, our road network. If I want to build a house and I can't get sight lines, or the road can't take the construction traffic, it's a factor in maybe getting a refusal. These people seem to be able to come in and knock ditches, hedgerows, vegetation out of the way. That's an anomaly within the planning system. I suppose other aspects of it, which we can, Clare County Council and a lot of our local people, businesses, particularly bed and breakfasts, glamping pods, right across East Clare, have invested heavily in a tourism product here. We're selling this side of the county as the most beautiful, peaceful, tranquil place to come and visit. And by the way, it is the greatest natural resource, and I have said this for many, many years, the greatest natural resource we have is the River Shannon and the tranquility and all that's associated with it. And here we are driving a coach and four through it with construction of these turbines and what have you. So it's going to have a huge impact on that. Offshore, there is an alternative, and I'm not saying I'm against the wind farms just for the sake of it. We do have an alternative. Offshore wind is the future. We've been to Money Point, I suppose, as elected representatives. We've had presentations. And by 2030, I think was the original date, it might be gone out to 2032 now, we are expected to be selling energy to Europe, to the UK. We're going to be energy rich. We're going to be making money out of it. Now, the question I will ask, that's 6 years away, 7 years away. Do we destroy what we have here now? Peace, tranquil communities, attracting good business, attracting people to come and visit us, enjoy the amenities and a way of life that we have here. Do we destroy all that now for the sake of waiting a couple of years? And I suppose the last point that I would make on it is in planning, and Martina raised the planning guidelines in her if you go in for a plan, if you have a plan for anything, or if you want to do anything, you must have a plan. And the planners will always say to you, you must have a coherent plan. So if you're doing something here in Scariff or down in Killaloo or Kilkishen or wherever, you must plan it. And the way you do it is you come together, you bring the various stakeholders and the people who are interested together. We now have a situation in East Clare stretching from Ballycuggan, Ogonnelloe, Toongraney, right back along the Schlieb Barnes, through Broadford, Oatfield, right into Meelick and Coona, where we have wind farms, I think 6-7 wind farms being popped up, various heights, nobody knows what's happening. So it's haphazard, premature development without having a fully coherent plan developed. And they're just some of the reasons. I could go on, but I'm passionate about that. I'm passionate about the communities who live, work, and who have lived and who want to raise their families in that area. There are alternatives. We're not saying no. I don't think anybody here sitting around this table will disagree and say that we don't need to find alternative energies. We don't need to be conscious of our environment and so forth, but we don't need to destroy it for the short-term gain that these wind farms are going to bring.
Thank you very much, Tony. Our final question that we've received from various local groups, and one that has struck a chord with many of them, is the type of communication, the level of communication between the council and local groups. Local groups were very active in looking after and maintaining public areas, and in general looking out for the place. And this is a question from Toongraney and also from Killaloo. Several local groups have pointed out that they receive little and sometimes no communication from the council or its agents when carrying out work in the area, whether it be roadworks or pathworks or whatever. The Killaloo Municipal District news page on the council website is out of date by 4 years. What actions, and I'll put this question to Alan O'Callaghan, what actions can you propose or implement to improve communication with citizens and groups?
David, I suppose your first part there, it's disappointing to hear that people are probably maybe not so much tuned in, but maybe are not aware of what's actually going on in their area, because like as regards if Clare County Council are proposing something like an active travel or like the RRDF here in the town, well, we'll go back here to Scariff for the minute. There was huge engagement. Now that's the big multinational ball of money that's going to be spent in Scariff. And like the Scariff town teams and the community council, they worked Trojanly hard to go through every square inch of that whole proposal. Now it mightn't be 100%, but they were happy enough, I feel, and we met them on numerous occasions. Clare County Council met them on numerous occasions. They came back, we dealt, it was a lot of touring form, but sometimes, okay, that it did happen here in Scariff, and we actually got the funding, and which is great, nearly 9 million of an RRDF funding. And what Martina says, that is some ball of money for Scariff, in fairness. Like, you know, we got RRDF for Holy Island as well, so and we got RRDF for Kilrush. I think as a county and as a municipal district, we're definitely punching way above our weight as regards the amount of funding that has come in for those kind of projects. But going back to what your question was asking, I suppose a lot of these stuff, they do have drop-in clinics and open days for stuff that does happen with those kind of projects. They do advertise in papers, they do advertise in media and stuff like that, but I'm kind of, sometimes people may not tune in at the time until an actual digger arrives on the ground and start actually digging. Now, I do promote with stuff that's happening. I do be on social media fairly active myself in giving people information, saying that this is happening. If you want to make your submissions, if you need, in fairness, the regular lay person mightn't understand something until it actually goes in place. And then you're kind of battling as to, oh, that corner's gone too tight or whatever. There was an issue that Tony raised originally with the Killaloo bypass. That and these are engineers and the auto tracted and all that kind of stuff. And I suppose, in fairness to Tony, they got it wrong in that incident. They were leaving a junction way too tight. Like, maybe on theory it should work, but it doesn't work, because sometimes what works in Kilkishen may not work in Tulla, what works in Bradford may not work in Kilmurray. You know, so because you have different movement of people. You have big out in Kilmurray. You have the farming sector with tractors and trying to get silage brought in, trying to spread slurry and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Where you go into an urban area, you wouldn't have maybe the movement of that kind of stuff around. So that's the way.
But let's say we're a small tidy towns group, and we've just done the flower beds on the approaches to the road, and the following week the council workers come along. It's been arranged, it's long in the pipeline, but the tidy towns group didn't know that they were coming along. Then, just saying a hypothetical situation, should the local groups be informed?
I don't agree with that, because I know within council really respect and honour the work that tidy towns do. And we're always trying to give them a few bob, because what regular tidy towns and these volunteer community groups, what they can do for a small bit of money, there's no way the council would ever be able to achieve it, because it's all done free gratis. If it might be put out a digger, we say wouldn't charge too much and all that kind of stuff. But I wouldn't certainly agree with that. It's sometimes just the bigger projects. I had it myself with active travel around my own area below. Now we actually came to a compromise for a finish, so it took a couple of attempts maybe to get it right. But I put the message out there. People didn't really tune in and say, oh yeah, sure, you know. And active travel in is all promoted through schools to help kids, and it's good. It's a great plan to get kids to school and stuff like that. But sometimes when you see a curb coming out and it's when the curb is actually in place or whatever, or something like that, or there's a car parking spot now being lost because of maybe a design that they'd put in order to tick all the boxes, you say, well then there is, but there's always room to negotiate there afterwards. You know, we have gone back and said, okay lads, this is not working, we need to change it. And I suppose the biggest example of that, and Tony will elaborate on that, is that issue below in the Killaloo bypass, which was a phenomenal, was it a mistake? It was, to be honest about it, but look, it was caught and highlighted on time, and it's been changed.
Okay, thanks very much.
And I suppose just to find one last thing, going back to the county council are active in the pyrite side of it as well, trying to get people into open clinics and have open days to get people to get in to understand to be able to fill up the forms and stuff like that, because a lot of that stuff is hard going, and to go through all that, and I suppose sometimes when funding comes, it's hard to draw it down unless you need a bit of help, because the paperwork, and sometimes we probably have it over. We have too much red tape and too much paperwork tied into that, these projects.
Great, thank you very much, Alan. Just picking up on something that Alan mentioned there, and this is a question for all of our candidates, and it is about the role of local community groups and volunteerism. And given the lack of council operatives to carry out general maintenance and cleaning services, as well as the difficulties in getting people to work on community employment schemes due to poor pay, would you commit to providing each development association or tidy towns group a budget to hire insured contractors to carry out these duties where they're not being done by the council? And it's a question that I think all of the community groups are interested to hear your response in, because it is harder and harder, and I think some of you have mentioned since COVID, to get volunteers to do these jobs. And as has been mentioned, the red tape, the insurance, the challenges, it's all there. So it's putting enormous pressure on volunteerism in our communities. And I'd like to start with Pat Burke on this question. We'll go right around again on this. Pat, what do you think about that? Giving a budget to community groups to hire contractors to do small maintenance jobs?
Yeah, I suppose for the last 10 years, since 2014, we've been allocated a general municipal allowance, which is our discretionary fund, Phil Hogan back in the day was Minister for Local Government, abolished the town councils, reduced the number of county councillors, and in return gave those of us who were elected in 2014 a budget, general municipal allocation, which we do give to local tidy towns groups and community councils. As regards volunteerism, I suppose there isn't a week I'm in the village myself with my own tractor doing whatever needs to be done, so that don't talk to me about volunteerism and all the lads are the same. Pat Hayes, of course, in fairness to him, is the supervisor of our scheme down in the village, and the lads work very well. And then we're an active community council. We'll row in with any extra work where there's a tractor needed, etc., that the lads may not have. So that's our help to the community rather than looking for money from the council to pay a private contractor. We don't do that because we don't need to do it. I'm just speaking for my own village. Definitely the shortage of general operatives is a major issue out on the public roads, which is a different thing altogether. We can do flower beds and everything else around the village, but when you go out on the public road, we have it down in the Killaloe area at the moment, a chronic shortage of general operatives. There's people out sick, there's people on long-term leave, etc. Something I highlighted at the last MD meeting under any other business. I don't understand how the HR department works fully inside in Clare County Council. Maybe some of the lads do, but chronic shortage there, and work isn't getting done as a result on the public roads. But I think the communities in our area do Trojan work, volunteering, and long may that continue. And as I said, don't ask me about volunteering. Was that until 10 o'clock last night in the village?
Your tractor is busy, I suspect.
It is.
That. Martina Cleary, do you have a view on whether local groups should receive a particular budget for light maintenance works where the council can't do it?
Yeah, in principle, yes, absolutely. I think any initiative in our local communities where there's community engagement and activity, we should be supporting them in any way we can. And the GMA budget, I think there needs to be a lot more transparency and diversity in how that is being allocated, and the suggestion did come in the material you sent about a monthly meeting. Absolutely, I'd be totally in support of it. I suppose it goes back to the point that Alan was talking about, is communication, and the diversity and changing demographic we have when it comes to communication. With Clare Pyrite Action Group, we have people that are on social media. They're the younger people, and they, that question came in, why are you using posters? Well, obviously, if you're on social media, you don't need posters. But there's a huge demographic in our communities that are not on social media. They don't even have a computer. They're not on email. So you need to be out there. You need to be having your meetings in the community face to face. You need to be going up to the homes of people. You need to be doing the visits. But you need to be monitoring the social media as well. And you need to have active communication. I'm totally in support of at least a monthly update, a meeting with people that are in your area, that you as a councillor, that you're there and you're seen to be there and you're answerable. And I suppose that's how successful we were with the Clare Pyrite Action Group. It was a live, ongoing communication for 3 years that we all together succeeded in bringing in the biggest grant in state history to this county. And Limerick got in based on our work. I can say that very honestly, the work we did here. The local property tax, big question, like where's that going? I have questions about that, So like that used to be recycled back in through the councils and, and again with the social and affordable housing, that the rents went into the county council, and money it was kind of like a circular economy. It was coming back in and it was going back into servicing the local community. Unfortunately, an awful lot of that resourcing now is kind of going into corporate, kind of landlords, companies. Around the issue of insurance, I'm very well aware of that, having been an artist in the community, that as soon as you bring in anything that's community-based, you're stuck with insurance, you're stuck with potential liabilities. So I understand the concerns that came in on that. So, but at the same time, I think going back to, I keep thinking of that Burn BO project up in, that was it's an award-winning scheme that we had. And how did it work? It brought in the farmers. It brought in the local knowledge of the land, the local knowledge of how to maintain. Let's look at hedgerows. I was looking at social media last year, and the response to this, bringing in a company, a rock bottom price to hack along hedgerows. It's an eyesore. It's an absolute like wasteland after it. And why aren't you working with the local farmers to actually look at different ways of maintaining the hedgerows, that it's sustainable? And it's not, it's always, I'm afraid, like with these kind of public open tenders, it's rock bottom, race to the bottom. I see it with the defective concrete block scheme commissioning as well. So you bring in the whole community, you talk to the farmers particularly, you talk to the local knowledges, because those things are disappearing, unfortunately, from our local knowledge and awareness.
Thank you, Martina. Joe Cooney, would you give a small budget to local organisations like the Tidy Towns to where the council can't do the job?
Yeah, look, I see where you're coming from, and I can see where the groups are coming from. But in fairness, there are different funds there where the community councils can make applications at the start of the year for funds to carry out certain works, and we say small works. And those funds are very helpful to the different community groups and the Tidy Town committees. But I suppose in the larger scale then, say you have community groups out there maintaining, looking after the likes of graveyards and big projects like that. And there's a lot of work involved in that. And I mean, Munnins now is a Tulla graveyard, and there's been a lot of concern about the amount of grass cutting that's going on there. There is a caretaker there, but he's only so many hours a week that he can spend there, unfortunately. And it's the same in other graveyards. But in situations like that, in fairness to the local authority, they will sit down with maybe the Tidy Town or the Graveyard Committee or the community councils if there is big projects like that, and see if they need to bring in a contractor. And we have mentioned ourselves, and I've been involved in different community groups where insurance is a concern to local community groups. When you are bringing in volunteers, and if the community group bring in the volunteers, they're the responsibility of the officers of the community group, and that's becoming a concern, and there's no point saying it's not. But yes, I would be in favour if there is a big project, the likes of them after saying that the council would help out the Tidy Towns Committee or the Graveyards Committee. But in fairness, the local authority are also looking at this and taking it on board as well.
So you're saying on a case-by-case basis?
On a case-by-case, yes. But I would say they're also well aware of the fantastic work that's been done out there by the different groups, and they are trying to support them as good as they can. But again, I suppose going forward, and I mentioned earlier on, not as easy to get volunteers, so maybe they might have to look at this different system going forward. But in all situations, they're there to help, and yes, I wouldn't be opposed to it, and I think it'd be actually a good idea.
Thank you very much, Joe. Pat Hayes, same question to you.
Sure, look at, I suppose, the bottom line here, the real heart of any county, it's volunteers and it's community groups. And I think whatever we do, we have to sustain community groups. And I think, I suppose, as a community supervisor for the last 30 years, I know all the communities right across this municipal district in my job. And while a lot of people depend on schemes to actually get workers to try and help and support communities out there, it's challenging at the moment to get workers in some areas to actually facilitate that. And that in itself is causing challenges that where graveyards and local areas can't be trimmed or maintained or looked after to the same level. But in looking at that and how to address that, one of the things I did as chair of the Rural Development Committee was we actually brought in 4 rural development officers, rural and community development officers right across the county, who are playing a vital role now, because these are the people that are meeting with community groups on a daily basis. They're advising them and working with them to get all the community grants. And there was never more of a range of community grants available. I think the challenge sometimes for it is the volunteers that haven't the time to actually apply for it. And that's why we appointed rural and community development officers to actually help communities. And every day, right across our municipal district, groups that you'd never think of are sitting down with Dan and Carol and our rural development team, and like that rural development strategy is paying dividends, because now we have so many different grant schemes that are out there at the moment, and we're all, as councillors, we're advocates as well for the community groups to try and get them funding. Yes, there are certain particular times and funding that could be made available, and extra funding should be made available to particular projects. But I think what we need to do here is, there is always a high risk. I think if we didn't have community groups out there, like the council is getting off very handy here in an awful lot of areas, and because communities have pride in their community. But we have to reward that and make sure that we maintain it. And anyway, we can do that going forward, because the day that we take out community groups and say, well, hold on, that graveyard down in Clonrush is now the council's responsibility. There are 144 of those in the county, only for the community sector here in this county. And I said it when I was mayor of this county, it was my key thing is that the community sector is keeping our county alive. So we, as elected representatives, have a duty to support them in any way financially, would not to take away from them or subsidy or put in some other organisation to run it. We have to, every effort has to be made to keep our community alive. There are so many volunteers out there through GAs, through community tidy towns, everywhere, and other organisations. So increase the financial support through the scheme so there's a fair whip for everyone across the place, is my view.
Thank you, Pat. Fiona, do you have a view on this question?
Yes, I see a parallel here with people who talk to me in business about people on the ground not being listened to when change is brought into a business. It sounds to me like it's the same thing, that no one understands their communities better than the people who are volunteering in their community. And I have been a volunteer. I was on Mount Shannon Community Council. I have gone litter picking for many years. And so I think there has to be an element of trust here in those volunteer groups whether it's a figure of several thousand, whatever it is, as long as it's made transparent in terms of what they're spending on. Yes, there's lots of supports, and you've mentioned supports, Pat, about grants, helping people get grants and apply for grants, but it's competitive and it is exhausting. I've been there. As a volunteer in a scout group, getting a grant is like pulling teeth, and I'd love to have known about the GMA, that maybe there might have been some available to local groups like youth groups as well. But I do believe we need to give a bit of I suppose bandwidth for volunteer groups to be a little bit more self-sufficient, that they can rely on this bit of funding that they don't have to apply for.
Thank you, Fiona. Tony O'Brien, would you give a budget for small maintenance works where the council can't do it themselves?
Yeah, certainly, and have done. That's why we're elected to Clare County Council, to represent our communities, and right across the municipal district, we've given financial support to voluntary groups within our communities who need to carry out improvement works, whatever it is, whether it's in halls, schools, whether it's in clubs, organisations, whether it's running functions, running festivals, or whatever it is. So anything that our community needs and we can support it, we will do. Obviously, it's not possible. It's the loaves and fishes, by the way. It's not possible to look after every single request that comes in. And at times you have to, you don't have enough, or you have to say if a figure is looked for, you have to divide it by 2, because there could be another community group equally as entitled, or not entitled, but as good, or an application, and you have to say, well, look, we'll split it and we'll give them, it'll give them a lift and so forth. So to answer your question directly, yes. Not only will I, but we have done, and I have done in the past, and anything that enhances the community. And I just want to concur with the previous speakers, all of them. As mayor last year, I got to see firsthand, and it really opened my eyes, the number of volunteers, the number of jobs and the activities carried out right across our county and our municipal district by volunteers, by people just taking pride in their own community, and we have a duty to represent them and to assist them.
Thank you, Tony. And finally, Alan, do you have a view on whether we should, whether the council should give a budget for general maintenance, cleaning, and such like?
Well, first of all, David, I always do help support any of the volunteer groups in any way I can at the minute, because I feel that they know what they want for their village or town or their area, not the Clare County Council coming in and bulldoze their own ideas of what they need. The people within the towns or within the villages or within the areas understand what they require, and we just need to support them. But there's a few things. Now, I just look around here, there's plastic bottles here at the minute. A levy went on that, right? I thought at the start, this could actually work out to be a good thing. I don't think now it is, because any road you drive, you'll still see the plastic bottle thrown out on the ground. So every time you count these bottles, they're all 15 cents. They're everywhere. You see them. I thought that the levy would stop that, or maybe definitely reduce it. I don't think it has. So going forward, is there an avenue that we could go after, and the government could maybe step up, and that 15 cent that doesn't go back to be recycled, that the money hasn't been claimed back, can the government now give money out to each county to give out to their rural communities? Because legal dumping is another thing, huge problem, and I do support any community in any way I can when they go litter picking. We said you have the untouched days, but to help support them, even to pick stuff up, because I see myself, I get calls, numerous calls all the time. There's a bag here, there's a bag there, there's rubbish down there, and if the council can get out, or one of us can get out and get that bag away out of there, it alleviates another problem, because if you leave that bag there for a couple of days, it's gone to 5 bags, 10 bags, and next thing it's gone to nearly a tractor trailer load. So sometimes, so we need to get out straight away and get that, and I do help and support in any way. It's a bit disappointing from the tidy towns, because we're all around. There's a couple missing, unfortunately, here today, and that's disappointing as well, but due to other commitments as well, they can't be here. But an email has gone out to us for different tidy towns to, no, it's all right for us, the 5 of us here, the 5 of us outgoing at the minute. We decided not to use posters. That's fair enough. That was the decision we made. We all made it. Now, for the new candidates, they decided that's fair enough. I have nothing against that either, but tiny towns have emailed us that there's certain people's posters up. Would they please take them back? Because you're now starting, the judgment of the tidy towns is starting very shortly, and they wanted the posters taken down. It's unfortunate to see that those posters haven't been taken down yet. And I see the likes of a circus coming to town, and they come in and they stick up signs on lampposts, and they're stuck on, and they're adhesive and all that. And next thing up and they're gone again. So I think the onus is on that kind of groups. Like, we all have festivals and stuff like that we all run in all different parts of our municipal district. The signs go up, they're taken down, but sometimes these things like that happens, and it's very misfortunate.
Thank you very much, Alan. Now we're nearing the end of our special broadcast, and I'm going to put one final question to all of you, if I may. And it is about the property tax, which partly funds local government. And at the moment, I think anyway, it is at its highest rate in this county, which is 15% of what it was originally set at. And councillors vote directly on raising or decreasing the tax. If elected, will you vote to maintain the current rate or to decrease it? And we'll start with Pat Burke.
Yeah, I have been supportive in the past when the council needed the funds that were distributed. Now, we had the issue of the equalisation fund, where County Clare was paying into a central fund to support other counties. Thankfully, that has come to an end. But having said that, when the figures would be presented to us, it was so... The increase was so minute per week on households, and that to get in the extra money to balance our books and to distribute funds around the county, I always went for the high rate, to be honest with you, and had no problem in defending it when challenged about it, even though the equalisation fund. But thankfully that's gone now. And I remember our previous minister meeting him one time and saying, this isn't fair, and obviously they did change it. So, yeah, it's all about getting money in to keep the services going.
Yeah, thank you, Pat. Martina.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I look at local property tax, universal social charge, the high jump between lower tax band and higher tax band in this country is highly problematic. I lived abroad in the Nordic countries, in Finland, for 13 years. I paid less tax than I pay here. And I go out and say, well, what am I actually getting for my tax? There's nothing, there's no childcare. There's no basic facilities sometimes for it, So any of those taxes, and I know under Sinn Féin as well, it's bringing down tax bands and looking at what are we getting and what we're getting, and certainly taking on feedback from the community.
So you would reduce?
Absolutely, if that's what the people need, and especially our local businesses.
Thank you. Joe Cooney?
I'd be on for maintaining what we have. Again, we need to deliver service to the people of our county, We don't want to cut services. We want to progress in what we're doing. And I think by maintaining what we have been doing that in the past. We've seen that in the different communities of improvement works, levy, footpath works, road works, whatever the case may be. We want to continue that going forward. And my belief is when we be putting our budgets in place at the end of 2024 for 2025, we will need to maintain what we have in order to keep making progress. So that'd be my say on it.
Thank you, Joe. Pat Hayes.
Yeah, I suppose property tax is judged in a year on, year out. Now, look at the last time we voted for 2 years, we had the power, we were given the authority to be able to set it for 2 years. And we were coming out of COVID and challenging financial times. A lot of money that would normally come to local authorities had been spent and supporting business and supporting everything. And I think this particular year and last year we were successful enough to make a good profit in the council. I think each year should be assessed, but ultimately the local property tax goes back into key areas of our council. It goes back into our housing, it goes back into our communities, it goes back into a whole range of things here. And while it's another tax on people, I would assess it year in, year out. But I wouldn't, it is easy to be populist and say we'll reduce tax and rates and all that. But if you take it that the cost of doing business in terms of our roads programme has increased by at least 20 to 25%, if we don't raise some money, the department said to us, if you can't raise your own money and support from your own resources, we'll give you extra money if you do it yourselves. It's kind of a chicken and egg situation. So we are challenged to go to the higher rate because it actually generates far more money. If we put in 20% into housing grants, we actually get 80% more from the department. So it actually gets our housing stock going again. So I think there needs to be a bit more PR, where the money goes and how we deliver it, but it actually makes a huge difference to communities. And that's a very important element because it actually goes back to our rural development strategy and going back into communities, part of that property tax.
Thank you, Pat. Fiona.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I agree with Pat saying it goes back into our communities. I'd like to see some more transparency around how that goes back into our communities. But what I'd really like to see is the council really engaging with the residential zoned land tax, and that replaced the vacant sites levy, which failed in large part due to the fact that local authorities aren't engaging with in terms of that levy, and that's a huge amount of revenue lost through lack of engagement in that particular tax. So the vacant sites, so we've all spoken of vacants and dereliction, we need to have a bit of teeth with that particular tax.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. Tony O'Brien, would you vote to increase or decrease the current rate of property tax?
I think you have to take what it would mean to the budget and put it in context. The local property tax, first of all, isn't paid by council tenants, for example. There are a number of exemptions and a number of people who don't pay it. I think it's about 60%. I'm going to stand corrected on the numbers. I don't want to mislead anybody. So there's a health warning with the figures I give. But I think it's around 60% of our people who paid in County Clare pay the 15% increase works out at about, I think it's about 90 cents or something like that a week or something. It's less. It's about 48 euros per year, and for that we do get payment back into our playgrounds. We do get community group grants. We do get reinvestment in our communities. So we can't have it both ways. We can't have on one hand say we want investment in all these facilities, but we don't want to pay nothing on the other hand. So whilst you might say, and it could be a headline, yes, keep the property tax increase, put in context what that means. To do away with the 15%, on the other hand, I will say to you, the increase was something like, I think Money Point alone last year was about 2.7 million. So you take away the increases on that and look at what you're costing. The greatest burden is on heavy industry, the multinationals in Shannon and in the industrial estates around our towns, Marshalls, Ennis and so forth. So to the citizens out there, people like ourselves who pay our property tax, I think the saving would be approximately 48 euros or 40 euros a year, something like that. So for that, I'm willing to pay the property tax and hold it at the 15%.
Thank you, Tony. And finally, Alan O'Callaghan, would you vote to increase or to keep the current rate or to decrease it?
I have to get re-elected first, I suppose that's the priority.
If re-elected.
Yes. I'd be in support of keeping it as it is. Because I suppose the five lads, those here, we can see the benefit for it. And it's only, as Pat Buck said, it's only a minute little increase. Because the bends did change there. Come back a couple of years ago, the bends did move and change. I suppose really and truly there's only two real avenues of funding that we can kind of have any say on, and that's the property tax and rates. The revaluation of rates has gone through at the minute. I think that's probably nearly completed now, and that's probably started. But I suppose the big game changer for us, that we got back that 2 million that was being siphoned out of our country, out of our county. The property tax brings in about, I think, around 10 million a year. And in fairness, I think we're one of the highest in the county for people paying it. I think it's around 96 or 97% of the people are paying their property tax, and glad to do so. But it's I can see the benefit of when the money comes in as to where we have obviously a GMA, which is a general municipal allocation, and that comes from that pot. But to get that 2 million back from central government, because it was been given out to the other counties, I suppose they weren't being as obedient as we were. It's great to see that back.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Alan. And that brings us almost to the end of this special programme, bringing the local electoral candidates to the attention of the listeners. Just to remind listeners that voting takes place on Friday, the 7th of June. And on my own behalf, I'd like to thank all of the candidates for your answers. Tony?
Before I finish, can I make a point? I just want to thank everybody for turning up today, and thanks Gareth Pia for having to go the debate and the discussion. It's very interesting that this is our second attempt to have but there are two candidates missing, two political parties who we don't know about. We don't know anything about what their aims are or what they intend to do. And you asked of the candidates that are here some very good questions and pointed questions, and we gave our answers, but we don't know what the others are, and they continue to run. So I think it's worth pointing out to the listeners that there are people who were invited here. We all make sacrifices. We got plenty of notice, and I thank Gareth Bay for that. We had plenty of notice to make our arrangements and make sure that we were, if we wanted to make ourselves available to be here. I thank you for that. But there are candidates who have run away from this, and I think it's worth pointing it out.
Thank you, Tony. We did, of course, invite all the candidates who were nominated, and for various reasons, work commitments in some cases, and they couldn't be here. But we take the point, and again, I'd like to thank all the candidates for answering the questions very clearly, succinctly, on time, and to wish you luck in the election, and I hope a reasonably good canvas that you'll be undertaking, that you've already started, of course, and that you'll be undertaking, and hope the weather is okay for that canvas. I'd like to hand it back now to our station manager, Jim Collins.
David, thank you very much. I too would like to thank all the candidates for coming. It's great to have you here. It's the first of these kind of discussions, debates we have had. I think it's been very informative, and I think all of you spoke very clearly, and I think our listeners at the end of this debate will have a better idea of how the council works and the various opportunities there are for the council to help individual areas. And they also know, I suppose, the areas where whoever is elected will have influence in council policy and in what happens. I'd also like to thank David, who has been the moderator, and all the team from the technical point of view here. And finally, I'd like to thank Derg Active Alliance, because There are marvellous facilities here in this building which have been put by volunteers in over the last few years, and it's allowed us to have a relatively comfortable area to chat and to talk about the election. And again, democracy. People talk about democracy in different parts of the world and how democracy is at risk in certain areas. Well, this is our local democracy, and it's so important that the ordinary voter has a say in who represents them at local level. So again, I'd reiterate, good luck to all of you, and thank you very much for coming in.